you can't debate anybody else on their truth. Like at the end of the day, someone who's hyper
What does
Muslim
their
versus
truth? What does their truth mean? Like, can somebody's their truth be false?
well, no, and that's the problem.
You can think of it more of like an interview where we get to
Okay.
explore together the reasoning that supports a conclusion that you think is true.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Do you have a statement that you want to share that you're convinced is true that I can ask questions about?
Sure.
And real quick, let me get the spelling.
Claudio. Claudio.
Claudio. Awesome. All right.
Claudio.
So, yeah, what did you want to share?
Well, it's interesting because we were talking over there, and your colleague, some random stranger, walked by and said, "Well, what's your truth?" And he said, "Change." Right? That change is kind of a fundamental truth. Which
Change?
will change as like
Fundamental nature of
well
the
in
universe.
terms of what do you in terms of epistemology, like what do you really know? And I would agree with that change is to me that the one constant is change, and that's Heraclitus, right? Heraclitus, I think, was the first pre-Socratic to talk about, to really on in the Western side really explore the nature of change
You can't
as
step
a
in the
truth.
same river twice.
Correct, right? So anyway, so there's that, and to me, grounding truth in that, I think that's important, right? Because what you have in the history of truth is various different a series of historical events where truth is defined in various ways, depending on that historical context, right? And each of those contexts, each of those worldviews tries to ground truth and knowledge in what is true at that time. But to me, what happens is then people get really enveloped in that truth, and they like the fish to water. They're not aware that they're in the water, right? And so they're really kind of enveloped in that time in history where that form of truth prevails. But the thing is that's Heidegger wrote a lot about this in Being in Time, right? It's the course of time and where being comes to the fore with a different revelation of truth. But bringing it back to change is what grounds that is change, right? And I think again people lose that when they think of truth or the grounding of epistemology, is that it's actually grounded in that constant flux and historical flow, where you've got different regimens of truth, different revelations of truth at different times throughout the course of history.
Okay.
So that's my argument.
Change is a fundamental truth.
Yes.
What is your definition of truth in this context?
Well, bringing it back to Heidegger, right? The preeminent German philosopher, he defined truth as he grounded in Greek thought, and in Greek thought, it's aletheia, which means in modern day terms, we call it unconcealment.
Unconcealment?
Unconcealment,
Okay.
which means the revelation of truth, meaning the revelation of being at any given time in history. It's kind of what I just finished saying, that truth in Heidegger's terms is revelation. It's the revelation of being at any given time in history to a different people.
And are you adopting this definition of truth?
Well, it's not so much adopting it, but it's going through the evolution of thought over the course of at least Western philosophic tradition, dating back to the pre-Socratics with Heraclitus, and then through the Socratics all the way through the religious scholars, and then the Enlightenment thinkers, and all the way up to where we're at now. Truth has kind of it's a stream of discourse. The whole discipline of philosophy is kind of a fluid stream of discourse where it's kind of led up to Heidegger being, I think, one of the last great philosophers who had something really meaningful, I think, and substantive to say about this. So it's not so much that I adopt it, it's more so that it seems to be a very compelling way of thinking about it,
Okay.
which as opposed to fixing on a specific truth that like Christianity or of religion or with logical positivism on like a logical kind of side of it. And that's the trend, is that we all tend to ground ourselves in a very specific truth. And our epistemology is grounded in a particular instance of truth that I believe it's whatever. It's sin and sinners in the Christian paradigm. It's heroes and villains in the Greek paradigm. It's whatever it is at any given time. And so anyway, the fact that throughout all of history, truth has been defined as what's relevant at the time, and they treat it as the absolute truth. Heidegger was the first, on top of Nietzsche, to come around and say that there's actually different moments of truth throughout world history that's grounded in the life experiences of people at a specific time.
Okay.
That makes sense?
I think so. Yeah. It's like truth is revealed at that moment in time.
Correct.
Does truth
And that's a very profound statement, by the way. That's like the essence of Heidegger's philosophy, which is arguably one of the last great thinkers in the Western tradition, like one of the really great pinnacle thinkers.
and this is the closest ideas around truth that kind of resonate with you the most?
Well, yeah, because it makes sense, right? And especially if you look at the world around us today, where there's such rigid ideology and dogmatism, whether you're a Trumper or you're on the progressive and social justice side, or maybe on the religious side, you're a religious fundamentalist and is, a Muslim fundamentalist. The tendency throughout history is that there's really concentrated worldviews where there's a very strict regimen of truth that people subscribe to wholeheartedly, and they'll blow you up and blow themselves up to defend that truth. And I think that when Heidegger comes around and says, okay, well, it's not that there's one truth that is really true, it's actually a plurality. It's a plurality of truths, and I think the challenge is to become comfortable with that. That someone there can be a Trumper, and I might be a hyper progressive, or vice versa, and I have to be just comfortable with that's their truth and this is my truth, and the both can coincide together.
That's interesting. How there's this idea of his truth, my truth. Can anybody be incorrect?
Well, yes and no, right? The question of incorrectness is a moral question, right? And that's what's really at the heart of what's going on right now politically between a Trump worldview and a progressive social justice worldview, is that people think they have the moral high ground in the argument. It's always a moral high ground that postulates that I'm correct and you're incorrect, and it's usually on a moral basis, right? Which there's validity to that, right? Because if I'm doing something violent towards someone else, If I'm doing something that is really an evil in the world, ostensibly, then someone should take a moral high ground and say that's not correct behavior. You should not be vilifying people who are homosexual or because they're a minority. Like that's not the best behavior, right? So yes, I think there is a moral ground that you can stand on, but the problem is that people use that moral ground, it turns into dogmatism, right? When you start to vilify the other person because they don't share your moral views. And that's the danger.
Can you think of a statement that you're convinced is true that is amoral?
Statement that is true that is amoral.
Because it sounds like
Absolutely. Well, Nietzsche was full of those. That it's, well, statements that are amoral, well, not amoral, right? You mean the absence of morality, right? Epistemology is amoral in a certain way, right? It's like that's the whole, I think, program with epistemology or,
the reason why I'm asking this is because when we were talking about truth, and I asked, can somebody be incorrect? In other words, can somebody say something that is not true, even if it's true to them? You brought up the idea of morality.
yes.
And what I'm asking is,
That's the only basis upon which you can try to get a high ground against someone else. Otherwise, you shouldn't tell anybody else how to live
okay,
or what their truth. You can't debate anybody else on their truth. Like at the end of the day, someone who's hyper
what is
Muslim
their
versus,
truth? What does their truth mean? Like, can somebody's their truth be false?
well, no, and that's the problem. The whole idea of like falsity versus veracity. That's kind of a modern day thing, right? Like it is a modern day thing. If you look back 200-300 years prior to that, that wasn't really something that was
Well,
in sway
that's
or
not
relevant.
like if I were to say this camera weighs 10 pounds, and it's my truth that it weighs 10 pounds,
Yeah.
does that mean that it's correct because I say that it's my truth?
Well, it does according to your paradigm of truth, is what I'm saying. See, it seems like that's grounded in science to say that it's 10 pounds. But the concept of a pound or 10 as a number, like those are just language games, as Wittgenstein would say. Those are language games. That's your way of interpreting and describing the world around you. So it's very relevant. So someone in another, there's been thousands of cultures throughout human history. Think about a Native American tribe or an Amazonian tribe. They're not thinking in terms of 10 pounds. They might pick up a vine or something, and for them, that's some other articulation of that. It's not 10 pounds, I'll tell you that much. They're not thinking in terms of 10, and they're not thinking about as a unit of measurement pounds. So for you, that's true because that's built into your language. You were thrown into that language system. So it's true to you as describing the weight of this as 10 pounds. But there's 1,000 other cultures that don't articulate it that way. So it's true to you. That's great.
Does the
Knock
weight
yourself out.
does the weight of the
But
camera
don't go to the Amazonian tribe and tell them they're wrong
Right,
because their unit of measurement or their way of even conceptualizing the gravity and weight of something is different than 10
yeah,
pounds.
because they use a different measurement system.
Correct.
It,
They don't even have a measurement system. The idea of measuring in the Western way is foreign to them.
maybe a better way to ask this is, does what does the way I measure the camera affect its weight?
Not at all. This thing lives in the world the way that it does, and we ascribe whatever value or interpretation to it.
It doesn't
So,
change the
so
actual weight of it.
Not at all. Not at
Okay.
all. Now that being said, there's a thing as gravity, right? So you can't have just some culture, Amazonian or Western, just say, "Oh, that thing doesn't weigh anything. It's light. So if I throw it at your head, it's not going to do anything," right?
But what if that's true for me?
Well, well, that's great. But at the end of the day, well, that's when you get into, where there is, I think, a grounding in some kind of sense of reality that if I were to grab this camera and throw it at your head, or you throw it at my head, whether you believe it has any weight to it or not, it's still gonna hurt me or you. And so,
Regardless of
what,
whether we say it's my truth that it doesn't or not.
yes, yes, but the way we interpret that is all I'm saying. The language we use to describe it, to interpret it, that's interpretation, right? That's hermeneutics, right? So it's how you interpret hermeneutics. So that's how you interpret things around you.
Okay.
And going back to Heidegger, right? His whole program was called the phenomenology of hermeneutics, right? It's how you have world lived experiences that you're in the throes of, and then how you interpret that, right? So we just happen to interpret it. I guarantee you that if you were to go back 2,000 years and ask a pre-Socratic this question, or ask the guy in the Amazonian tribe this question, or the guy in the native North American tribe versus the dude in Vienna and the Enlightenment, how you did, they're very different explanations, right?
However,
the physicality of it remains true.
Yeah, that remains constant.
Yes, there is physicality to it.
Regardless of our interpretation of it.
Right, there is physicality to it, there is weight to it.
Uh-huh.
But how I might describe that physicality and that weight, and it's in the West, we think in scientific terms. There's gravity, there's weight, there's this physical thing, there's these atoms. And so yeah, every one of these different examples I'm using of different groups and ways of life in different peoples would have their way of describing that.
Yeah,
and I think it would all boil down to them describing that there is some weight to it, there is some physicality to it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The way we interpret something doesn't necessarily change the state of affairs.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And that's, I think, and I'm going to bring that to Heidegger, that's the nuance of his I think, contribution to our understanding of truth. That truth happens at a specific time in a specific place with people who are thrown into that worldview, and that's what shapes why you might refer to that as a camera that weighs 10 pounds and whatever other attributes versus how someone in a different point in time, in a different history or a different culture, even on the same time plane, would describe that, interpret that differently. And that plurality, that's important. So going back to your question of epistemology and truth, and back to your colleague here, when we talk about the rate of change, a corollary of change is plurality, right? Things are constantly changing, and there's a constant plurality of views swirling around that change as it propels through time.
Cool. Well, that was fun. Anything else you want to say?
No, that's it.
Yeah.
Thought I'd just share that.
Yeah. Do you have any questions for me?
What for you? Like, what truth?
Yeah.
What does truth mean to you? Did what I say resonate? Like, what's your view of truth?
It's very familiar. The kind of the description of truth that you've been giving, and I'm kind of with you about if something's true, it's true regardless of how we feel about it or how we interpret it. Like, a statement is true or it's not true, regardless of what language we're speaking, regardless of what culture we're coming from. Truth is that which corresponds with the reality that we share. That's kind of how I see it.
It's founded in a culture, ultimately.
Yeah,
it's not a scientific equation. It's a sociocultural equation.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. I would say that we share a world, but we interpret it differently.
Exactly.
The world is, regardless of how we interpret it, it is the state of affairs. And
right.
I guess whenever I say something is true, I'm not injecting necessarily morality or relativism, I guess. I would maybe choose a different word, like our perspective.
Yes.
When I hear somebody say my truth, what I hear is my perspective based on my experience, which I think is different than truth. Truth is what it is, regardless of my experience and my interpretation of it.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. Cool.
Awesome, brother.
Thanks, Claudio.
Thank
That was
you,
great.
man. I appreciate it.
It's really coming.